Ready to go?
I'm ready.
Oh, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 11th, 2022 meeting of the Sacramento Regional Transit District and our Board of Directors. This is a virtual meeting, and all speakers, the board, and staff, please announce your name when you begin to speak. This meeting is being live streamed, and the slide on the screen shows you the information on how to join our webinar via Zoom. You can also call into the meeting. The numbers on the screen. And if you can't see the screen, it's 253-215-8782. And the webinar access code is 816-9186-9484. If you're participating by phone, please press *9 to indicate a desire to comment. And if you're joining us online through Zoom, please push the raise hand button. Be sure to unmute yourself when it's your turn to speak and voluntarily state your name for the record. Now I'd like to ask our clerk to call the roll.
Director Budge.
Here.
Director Harris.
Here.
Director Howell.
Here.
Director Hume.
Here.
Director Jennings. And Director Kennedy is absent. Director Natoli.
Here.
Director Chenier.
Here.
Director Cerna.
Here.
Director Valenzuela.
Here.
And Chair Miller.
Here.
And with that, we have a quorum at 9 votes, and this meeting of the Sacramento Regional Transit District will be cablecast on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse. Today's meeting will air on Saturday, April 16th at 2 p.m. and Sunday, April 17th at 9 a.m. on Channel 14 and webcast at metro14live.saccounty.net and is closed caption. This meeting can also be viewed at youtube.com/Metro Cable 14.
Thank you. Director Hume, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure, please address the flag. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to the flag
flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's pretty good for a Zoom meeting. All right. Tabitha, would you please announce the first item?
Okay, the first item is the consent calendar, items 2.1 to 2.8.
Do I have any questions or items wishing to be pulled by directors?
I'll move consent.
Motion and a second to approve consent. Before we vote, is there any public comment? Tabitha?
I am trying to get back to the screen.
Okay.
It's not working. Just when it was going so great.
There you go.
Okay, we do have, it looks like Director Natoli's hand is up, and then as far as I do not see any public comment.
Okay, Director Natoli, did you want to comment?
Thank you, Chair Miller. I just had lost connection and I was still on mute, so I just wanted to raise my hand. So I'm now back in amongst the board, so we're good. So thank you.
Darn glad to have you on board.
Okay.
There's a motion and a
that's all.
second. Tabitha, would you please call the roll?
Director Budge.
Yes.
Director Harris.
Aye.
Director Howell.
Yes.
Director Hume.
Aye.
Director Jennings. Director Kennedy is absent. Director Natoli.
Aye.
Director Chenier.
Aye.
Director Cerna.
Aye.
Director Valenzuela.
Yes.
And Chair Miller.
Aye.
The consent calendar passes with 9 votes. And
Thank you.
Director Jennings has just joined us.
Mr. Chair, this is Director Cerna. Point of order.
Yes, go ahead.
Just wondering whether or not, and she may already be on this, but can Tabitha move Director Natoli from the attendees list to the panelist list? I think that might be some of the confusion.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
Actually, because he called in from a phone, it just allows me to give him permission to talk.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sure that's all he wants. So
Exactly.
That's dangerous. I get permission to talk, but we'll take it. Okay.
I know, sorry, I wish I could.
Thanks, Devin. Thanks, Phil. Okay.
All right, on with the next item, please.
Okay, the next item, item number 4.1 was listed as an action item, but will be just an information item. And it's Roseville Road Light Rail Station Safe Parking Proposal Update. And Chris Flores, Lisa Hines, and Olga Sanchez Ochoa are here to present this item.
Chairman Miller,
Yes,
I'm sorry, I didn't see my name on that list that voted on the consent calendar.
oh, did
Just
you
wanted
not
to make
vote?
sure. I did.
Okay.
Just wanted to
Adam,
make
can you
sure that,
update that? Yeah, that would have made the past 10-0, right?
Yes, with 10 votes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Director Jennings.
thank you.
Back to
And
4.1.
do you want me to reread 4.1 or is?
No, I'm waiting for staff to
Okay.
present the item.
Great, Adam, do you mind pulling up the PowerPoint? And while he's doing that, as Tabitha mentioned, this is going to be an informational item as we receive some additional feedback.
Understandable.
Great. Good evening, Chair Miller and directors. Last October, the board delegated authority to Sacramento General Manager to negotiate a three-party lease agreement between Caltrans, the City of Sacramento, and Sacramento for a temporary safe parking program at the Roseville Road Light Rail Station. Since that time, Sacramento staff has had many meetings with the city and Caltrans to finalize the details regarding the program operations, safety, security, and other items. Tonight, we are back before the board to provide an update on the progress being made on the lease agreement. As I mentioned, this is an informational item as we seek feedback on the remaining items that differ from the board's previous motion. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the Roseville Road Station is located in the northeast part of the city along the Blue Line. In total, pre-COVID, over 500 cars utilize the lot daily, one of the most popular park and ride stations in the system. The program would utilize 90 Sacramento parking stalls, and a 9-foot covered fence will wrap around the safe parking operations. The proposed site is approximately 300 yards from the station platform to the shelter fence. Sacramento currently utilizes the area via an encroachment permit from Caltrans. The city and Sacramento have agreed to various program operational guidelines, which we highlighted back in October. Let me highlight a few. The safe parking program shall serve no more than 100 guests at a time. The site shall operate for 1 year with an option to extend. A curfew shall be enforced between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. daily. The safe parking program operator shall have trained staff on site at all times. And the city will provide full indemnification to Sacramento, as well as provide insurance or commitment to cover costs should any accidents or liabilities occur. Now I'd like to introduce Lisa Hines, Sacramento's VP of Security, Safety, and Customer Satisfaction.
Thanks, Chris. When the board delegated the authority to the general manager to finalize a lease agreement, staff was directed to seek a public safety zone that was as large as possible, but also legally defensible. This slide shows a draft map of the public safety zone that the city has provided to Sacramento. When the board delegated authority to the general manager last October, it was also understood that any camping or storing of public property within the public safety zone would be prohibited and strict enforcement would occur. After meeting with city staff, they have changed the language in the lease pertaining to enforcement. The city now only intends to enforce within the public safety zone if an individual is urinating, defecating, or blocking the public right-of-way. Last September, the city opened the X Street Navigation Center, a 100-bed shelter along Broadway near Alhambra Boulevard. When the center launched, the city also established a public safety zone in the surrounding vicinity of the shelter. This picture shows an unhoused encampment along Broadway underneath Highway 99. Despite the public safety zone boundaries, the city has not enforced this non-sanctioned encampment. Currently, SAC-RT Police Services is not allowed to enforce the City of Sacramento's critical infrastructure ordinance. SAC-RT has a major safety concern that we will see an increase in encampments near our tracks, bridges, and stations that may result in severe damage to their property or to themselves. Last September, a large recreational vehicle parked on Caltrans property caught fire, burning the underbelly of the Roseville Road Winter Street Bridge, as well as many parked vehicles. The fire resulted in serious damage to the underside of that bridge. The bridge is owned by Caltrans. SAC-RT had entered into a maintenance agreement with Caltrans in 1988 as part of the light rail starter line. As part of the maintenance agreement, SAC-RT is responsible for cleanup and repairs to the bridge. Last week, after delays in accessing the bridge because of an encampment, a bridge inspector determined the cost to repair the damage to the bridge is estimated to be $13 million. These are funds SAC-RT does not have. Last July, the city of Sacramento passed a critical infrastructure ordinance with the goal of protecting public interests and safety. The list includes SAC-RT light rail stops, parking lots, bridges, and track. The city has told SAC-RT they can remove encampments established within 25 feet of these locations. Unfortunately, we have not seen any enforcement of the critical infrastructure zone, and we are hoping to better collaborate on protecting our shared assets. Now I want to introduce our General Counsel, Olga Sanchez Ochoa.
Thank you, Lisa. So one of the sticking points between the city and SAC-RT during these negotiations is the issue of the removal of homeless encampments that are certain to crop up outside of the safe parking site, as Lisa has shown in other examples at other safe parking sites in the city. SAC-RT has SAC-RT has asked the city to agree to remove the encampments as they are established, but the city has said that because of Boise, they cannot remove the encampments unless they are within 25 feet of critical infrastructure, which does include SAC-RT's tracks and bridges, but does not cover the entirety of SAC-RT's station, including the park and ride lot and immediately surrounding areas. And at this point, it is unclear that the city will enforce the 25-foot zone. The city advised that moving unhoused individuals in the past has triggered many lawsuits against the city, and the city cites concerns that if they remove any encampments that may spring up at Roseville Road, it will trigger additional lawsuits. So consequently, relying on the Boise decision as guidance, the city has said that the only thing that they can do in those areas is cite the trespassers for unlawful behavior, such as parking a vehicle for more than 72 hours, using drugs, defecating or urinating in public, or blocking the flow of traffic, but they cannot move them. The city has asked SAC-RT to take on the liability associated with the removal of the homeless encampments by asking that the SAC-RT board direct RTPS officers to remove encampments from SAC-RT's property that fall outside of the critical infrastructure zone. This shifting of liability will result in SAC-RT incurring additional costs that it did not intend to take on, and undermines the stated desire among some board members to ensure that the city fully indemnifies SAC-RT under this project. It also diverts critical funds away from providing transit service to cleaning up the homeless encampments, which is not SAC-RT's core business. If SAC-RT takes on the responsibility, in addition to exposing SAC-RT to lawsuits, it will overburden SAC-RT's police force that includes 24 officers who are already stretched thin providing law enforcement services over a 440 square mile service area. I now pass it back to Chris.
Thank you, Olga. As we mentioned, SACRT is looking for guidance from the board as we work to finalize the lease agreement. We have talked about the public safety zone and concerns about enforcement and potential shift in responsibility to SACRT. There are some additional unresolved issues we would like to highlight to the board. First, the handling of customer complaints. The city has advised SACRT that customer complaints regarding the safe parking operations can be referred to 311. We are concerned that this will not sufficiently or timely address SACRT's customer concerns and will result in SACRT customer service representatives taking on the burden of the calls. Additionally, when we presented to the board in October, the city had committed to providing security inside the fenced safe parking operations. They have now told SACRT they do not plan to have security within the safe parking site for concerns of how the patrons will view the security guards. Lastly, we want to highlight that SACRT staff has spent many hours working to help launch the safe parking program. As a transit agency, we do not receive any federal, state, or local funding to address homelessness. We were recently told by City of Sacramento staff they do not have funds to launch additional safe parking programs, including the Franklin Light Rail Safe Parking Program. The focus of these programs pull staff and limited resources away from SACRT's mission of operating public transit services throughout the county. Thank you. That concludes our presentation. We were happy to answer any questions, and we appreciate any board feedback. And we will be sharing additional information with the board at a subsequent meeting.
Thank you, Chris, Olga, and Lisa. Director, comments, questions? Looking for hands. Director Harris, please.
Thank you, Chair. You know, there's a lot to be said about this subject, and I fully understand the position of RT as regards any extraneous camping in and around the site. Look, we're all familiar with what happened at Roseville Road and the underpass, what happened at our City Hall garage. There are issues that do arrive, you know, along with a homeless encampment. I would say this, myself and Supervisor Desmond have each approached our respective councils to find out what kind of a defense zone we could actually place around a homeless encampment, installation, safe ground, what have you. The fact of the matter is Martin v. Boise has not been tested in this regard. But we also found out at our safe ground site at 5th and W that even though it was well run inside the safe ground, a lot of campers started camping in the immediate vicinity and definitely caused problems. I think that our RT's concerns are well founded, and frankly, I would say that we should not move forward unless the city is really willing to test Martin v. Boise in terms of keeping a defensible perimeter. These are really significant investments in these safe ground sites. And for them to be successful, they cannot, one, be an attractive nuisance, and two, you know, not engender the kind of problems that we've seen at the Alhambra and X site, which is people come in for food and a shower and go out and cohabit with their friends in the immediate area. It's been a problem for the city with that particular homeless program that we were not able to clean up the immediate area around the shelter. And it's a continuing issue, and it's a problem because we promised we would do that. So I think that we will make progress in this regard in terms of saying, okay, if we invest in a safe ground site, any kind of sheltering site, we will have a perimeter around which we can defend it and just say no camping allowed, period, and enforce that. My feeling is that that is the way to make our investments worthwhile and successful. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome, Director Harris. Director Hume?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I echo everything that Councilmember Harris just mentioned, Director Harris just mentioned. But Olga, I'm curious with respect to one of the points that Director Harris brought up, and that I've been looking into a little bit myself, and that is going back to Martin v. Boise, saying that a jurisdiction cannot enforce an illegal camping ordinance to displace someone without providing a shelter bed alternative. However, I know that some jurisdictions, and granted, not necessarily under the purview of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, but some jurisdictions enforce it in a different way and this has actually been done in the city of Sacramento surrounding City Hall, wherein the camping is permitted, but during certain hours. And so you cannot erect your campsite until a certain time, and it has to be taken down by a certain time. Have we explored, because again, to the point that was just made and to the kind of the point of what is and is not beneficial to RT relative to this, if we are creating a larger problem by creating the safe parking zone and not having defensible space or a zone around it that, the whole point was to try to get this situation off of Roseville Road. Have we looked at what are the limitations of Martin v. Boise relative to alternative enforcements?
Well, we've looked at it internally at Regional Transit, but we haven't talked to the city about it. One thing to make clear is that Martin v. Boise does not apply to Sacramento Regional Transit. If we had our own law enforcement, we could move everybody at any time because we're not a municipality. But because we rely on the city's police force to enforce the laws in our stations, our hands are tied. So that's one of the challenges we have. The other thing is, well, actually, we just haven't talked to the city about, how would it work to enforce camping during certain times immediately outside of the safe parking site, because we just have concerns because we do operate till midnight. It's hard. I think conceptually it would be hard, like, oh, you can't camp here except for between 1 and 3 in the morning when we're not in operations. So, but to answer your question, we haven't explored that with the city at all about, limiting and allowing camping during certain times.
Is it safe to assume that as we go forward with this, future board meetings will have greater legal analysis relative to liability and such, and how enforcement? Okay,
exactly.
I look forward to that because again, we're struggling to find solutions. This is obviously a problem bigger than any one agency or any one jurisdiction. But when you're looking at the goal of regional transit and what we're trying to do, particularly at park and ride sites, to get people to leave their cars to come onto public transit, this was, like I say, a tenuous opportunity at best. And so now it seems to be growing even more complicated. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Yoon. Director Valenzuela.
Thank you, Chair. I have some follow-up questions for RT staff because I think one thing we know about these safe sites is that no two sites are the same. And so I want to ask some specific context questions because WX and Front Street really aren't great examples. We set those up in 10 days. We had no safe zone agreements around them because we were just rapidly trying to respond to an imminent removal of hundreds of camps versus Miller Park, where we have set up and we have been able to tell people that they can't camp outside. We've had at least one camp spring up outside of the fenced area, and they were asked to either come inside or to leave, and they opted to come inside, right? So there are ways for us to manage this. So am I understanding that today, so before there's any safe camping, if somebody were to start camping in an RT parking lot or on the station, who would ask them to leave?
I'll take that. This is Lisa. So if it was in the parking lot, we have rules and ordinances. So that would be Regional Transit Police Services. It could be a security guard. It could be a transit ambassador. It could be a SAC-RT employee.
So essentially, am I understanding correctly? And sorry, because I feel a little caught off by like the intricacies of this conversation. So I'm just trying to unwind them a little bit. Is what you're asking the city to do to also enforce no camping, take over enforcement of the whole parking lot and station area? Is that the dispute? Or is that part of what you're asking them to do? And that's what the city is saying no to?
So Correct. So what we have the safe parking zone, obviously with the 80 to 100 folks that'll be in there. And then
Yeah.
the city has established a safety priority zone. And that zone is where we're asking the city, that includes under the bridge where we establish that there's the damage that we have to come up with that 13 million for.
Yeah.
We don't want reoccurring problems.
Yeah.
So we're asking the city to enforce no encampments in that safety priority zone, which would be right up against our tracks underneath that bridge to protect our Sacramento assets, which we believe we got that direction from you guys, the board, on a previous occasion.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to get really into the weeds. And I don't know if you have a map of the zone or something that we can look at, because I guess I'm trying to understand, are you asking city staff? Because I don't understand why we would say no to enforcing on like non-RT property, like say like nearby the entrance to the site, like where a lot of those cars are now, versus if you're now asking them to take over enforcement on RT property. And is that what they're saying no to? I'm trying to get to like a very nuanced distinction here, if that makes sense. So are you asking them as part of this, is point of order here that you're frustrated by that the city is saying no to enforcing on any camping on RT property on which you can currently ask people to leave with your current authority as a transit agency on transit infrastructure?
I think it's more relative to the safety priority zone, which is not RT property. That's Caltrans property, City of Sacramento property. And that was something that was promised to us in the onset of this project, that just like Councilmember Harris spoke to, that you had the W6 Street location and then lots of people came and parked.
And that's a totally separate thing, Lisa. So I want to stick to the Roseville Road thing because I just explained what happened with WX. We didn't have an agreement with Caltrans. We didn't do anything that we're doing right now. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation now. So I know the city can't enforce on Caltrans property without an agreement from Caltrans. And so I feel like that part distinct, okay, we can try to tackle that. And because I'm trying to get to a list of things we need to do if this conversation is going to move forward, rather than just leave it with, gosh, I don't know, Boise, because that's not really specific enough for us to have a to-do list here. So if we're going to move forward with this, it sounds like what we need is an agreement from Caltrans around enforcement of that area. Either they're doing it or the city. And we've offered this to them in the past with other properties. You know, we'll come in and do it if you need to, if you don't have the resources. So Caltrans property. And then you're saying, we're also saying that we can't enforce on the city property that is within the legally defined safety zone around the perimeter. So those are the two questions we need to ask. Okay, thank you for nodding your heads to that. So happy to keep following up. I know Councilmember Chenier has his hand up as well, but would really like to figure this out because I think, again, I've opened 3 of these things in my district since I've taken office a year ago. And I got to tell you, learned a lot of lessons from WX and Front Street when we set those up. And a lot of them are the things you're talking about here, which is having a really clear order of operations on who's in charge of what. So happy to follow up and play whatever role with staff in terms of figuring out what's going on here and how we can move this forward so that everybody is better served by this transit station, since there's so many folks over there who need so much help. So thanks, Chair.
You're welcome, Director Valenzuela. Director Chenier.
Thank you. So it's a little frustrating. Just on process, I would have hoped that at least for the city folks on RT, we would have gotten briefed, or we would have invited city staff to come here as well. So I feel like we're a little bit, so I was unaware of the challenges in the negotiations, and would have been, I think, helpful to be able to have some conversations and knowledge about it going in. You know, this is a little bit where we have multiple bureaucracies in the same place. So RT, the city, and Caltrans. And I've certainly been working with Caltrans around the Alhambra NX shelter, and they've had some problems because they've had some contracts that are challenged, and they're finally coming in first week of May to do cleanup in there. And some of the encampments around WX or around the X Street Navigation Center, having a little challenge getting them to even look at what's underneath the freeway, which I think was one of Lisa Hines' pictures that they showed us. So I want to continue working on this. I think we have an obligation as public servants to get after this and try to make a dent in the problem. We know, as of today, there are 99 people in the X Street shelter. So that is full. We have some other pieces that we're working closely with the county on to open up so that we will be able to move folks. I think this is still an opportunity site that we want to take a good look at. And I'm more than willing to sit down with whomever to see if we can work out some solutions to the challenges that you've put forward. Again, I would have hoped that we would have gotten a little bit of a briefing beforehand and had a city staff person or two in on this meeting to have this discussion. I don't think that we can solve the problem or the problems that you're having, the challenges that you're having in this forum.
And that's why this is just a information item. We're bringing this item back, but we wanted to start raising the issues with the board that we're having, the challenges that we're having to ensure that regional transit, is a good partner, but that, we don't end up in a position where, all of our resources go to managing the problems that could potentially spring from the folks coming in outside of the safe parking zone that the city has told us they can't move.
No, I totally understand that. And we're all directors of RT and have a responsibility to regional transit. And I feel that heavily as well. Again, I just think that there probably could have been some better ways to do this. I don't know that, well, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Director Chenier. Director Cerna.
Thank you, Chair. So I do understand that this is an informational item tonight. No, we're not expected to act. I appreciate the work that Chris and others, our council, have put into this. And Lisa, I appreciate your public safety lens that you've applied. I just want to kind of remind all of us again that we have to look at this two ways. One is the opportunity perspective. We have an opportunity to I think, complement what we're all trying to achieve in our respective jurisdictions as it relates to what is now obviously a crisis when it comes to our unsheltered constituents and how best to simultaneously apply a compassionate continuum of care, but also respect the impacts that come with trying to do that. So I remain generally supportive of using this particular regional transit asset for the purposes that have been outlined to be that complement. And I think there is a way that we can do that. Obviously, it hinges on the city's partnership and cooperation. And so I'm thankful that Director Valenzuela has kind of asked the questions that she has and outlined a to-do list of sorts so that by the time we do come back and we are expected to act, we can have a thoughtful discussion about the pros and cons as we do all other subjects. But again, I continue to look at this from the standpoint of, well, if we don't do something here, then what can we expect in terms of the continuation of suffering, the continuation of impacts, not just to the areas around the site, whether it be the golf course or the businesses along Roosevelt Road, but to RT itself. So I would encourage all of us to keep that open mind when it comes to debating with ourselves and with each other at some point the merits of this. The de facto do nothing decision does come with some consequence. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cerna. Any other comments from directors? It's really clear to me that first of all, our concerns are genuine. Our desire to help is genuine. But I think our concerns about the safety zone and enforcement around it is a concern that's pretty clear. And I understand jurisdictional issues, but if it wasn't for the putting folks there, we wouldn't need the extra security. So I think that's worth discussing. And before I close the item, is there any public comment, Tabitha?
There's two hands up, and Jeffrey Tartaglia and Glenn Mandelkorn.
All right. Jeffrey, you're first.
Well, I would have preferred to get the last word in, but in 2 minutes, I cannot possibly, or 3 minutes now, I cannot possibly state everything to bring to your attention. But as being since 2016, point in time count, I've watched every time our homeless population double every single time. And I will tell you, I already know that when we did this one in February, it already, again, more than doubled. I can't tell you the numbers yet, and you will find out the numbers soon. But I will tell you that we have over 320 encampments in Sacramento. And the problem will be for Roseville Road is 100 people. There's more than that. There's more than 3 times that amount on Roseville Road. How you're going to be separated and do that, I'm suggesting that you may really need to ask ad hoc or whatever to bring some of the talents together, to go to the COC that coordinates homeless and ask for an RT representative to see what in the world is going on, because you need to be informed and you need to find out how in the world can we begin to address this problem. As you heard in Rancho Cordova, because of somebody dying on the American River, now the new effect that's being transmitted into and new changes that are being implemented because they coordinated with the Rangers, the Sheriff's Department, and my understanding for Roseville Road, that's actually more in the procedural of the Sheriff's Department that's over there on Grant Road, is more where they're going to be coming your law enforcement effects. I don't know if that has changed from when you did the evaluation of Roseville, when you considered changing it to a different location. But I will say you've got a much bigger problem, and I will say to you that the board really needs to direct, and I will be happy to offer some time up if there's more that needs to be explained and explored. Now, I translate from the Well Space Center on Broadway to the Smart and Final. And indeed, in the last 6 months, there has been no court enforcement, or should we say code enforcement, going by there and explaining to the encampment underneath the 99 freeway of what they have to require for public access. It is making people on the Route 51 take your bus because they don't dare use the sidewalks. It's something, Jay, that needs to be examined further, and you need to bring code enforcement and public works and the other ones. And we are talking about that because of the necessary for sweeps. And today you actually did something up there at Howe and Fair Oaks Boulevard, and I will stop talking from there, but invite you. There's way more that needs to be discussed and talked about, and more than your information is going to be provided to you right now.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for your comments. Is it Glenn next? Go ahead, Glenn.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you quite well.
Okay, very good. So yes, because the very last few words of this section said that you're looking for how to proceed at this juncture, I came up with some thoughts and ideas about the whole Roseville Road situation, especially the closest parts to SAC-RT property. The Roseville Road in general is an eyesore. That said, I remember this one homeless lady I once talked to who she kept her area very nice. And she told me something like, just because I'm homeless doesn't mean I have to be a slob. So I called her the cleanup woman. My idea here is basically the philosophy of the very people who are creating the problem can be part of the solution. And in order to tell you what I'm getting at, I'm thinking of a few stations down along Blue Line. About 4 or 5 years ago, at 8 a.m. on Saturday mornings, I would see a whole bunch of people, about 15 to 20 people. And I'm hoping that some of you at SACRT know what I'm talking about. So this was Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. About 15 to 20 people were wearing these yellow vests that said RT. RT was written in solid black. These people, I believe they were part of some kind of community program where, unfortunately, they had done something unlawful, maybe a DUI, a robbery. And as part of their becoming a member of society again, one of the things they did was go to different stations. They would board at the employee station, and then they would go, like one time that I did talk to them, I thought they were special SACRT employees, and then they explained to me what it was all about. They were going to 47th Avenue. So my idea is, if I don't know all the legal ramifications of this, but just as a general idea, if the people in the homeless encampments, if some of them could be persuaded to please clean up their act, and maybe they could clean it up in such a way that is like this program that I described of 15 to 20 people, these people, these homeless people, could actually serve as an example, as role models to the rest of the homeless people to please clean it up, feel good about the area, feel good about yourselves, and help everybody, including riders like me of SACRT. So hopefully you guys can piece together what I've said. You know about the program I'm referring to from 4 or 5 years ago, and this could be part of the solution, in addition to all the legal and Boise type ramifications you need to take into account. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Glenn. Any other hands up, Tabitha?
Ronnie Miranda's hand is up, but I believe he would like to talk on item number 6.
Okay. Any other director comments on this item? If not, would you please call the next item?
The next item is public addresses the board on matters not on the agenda.
Okay, let's go ahead and call Ronnie. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Good evening. How you doing?
Real well.
Okay, I'm having really some concerns with the Smart Ride. I just emailed you guys, and then I was speaking to one of the managers, and the issue is still not being addressed. So these drivers are constantly being late. I had to call again today because the driver claimed that he showed up to my apartment, was a no-show. This is really upsetting me a whole lot. And I'm to a point where I'm ready to write a letter to City Council, and I'm to a point where I need to write a letter to the County Board of Supervisors for Midtown area.
Hey, Ronnie, is it okay if I have, I know you've talked to some folks, can I have customer service reach out to you?
No, I want
Okay.
the Board of Directors to take this matter.
Any other comments?
Jeffrey Tartagia has his hand up.
Okay, go ahead. Jeffrey, go ahead.
Well, good evening, board. If you can hear me, the device I'm on doesn't explain that well, but I appreciate 2 things I'm going to comment. This is finally, after 2 years, you took the 88 and the 86 and acknowledged that it starts at 9th or 11th and J Street, replacing finally after 2 years the 9th Street. There are problems with that location, and I believe they're being investigated, and a site manager has gone out there and looked to see that you have the block so that you can put those 2 buses so they do not interfere with the bus stop at 11th and J Street. I thank you for doing that. But To my knowledge, you still have not corrected the Mercy San Juan bus stop of I think it's 1699. It's right in front of the shelter, in front of the thing. It's not in the SAC RT library, so you can find out when the bus is going to come there. Fortunately, that's only with number 30. You also have that same issue that occurs at Broadway and 8th Street when you come around the corner right across from the, in a sense, the cemetery and there. I wonder how many other bus locations are not being active in the system when they should be active bus stops. The other thing that I've taken pictures and reported is for 8th and 9th Street, which of the 100s you have canceled as of April 3rd. And once again, you have not corrected the problem of making those non-operational. My understanding is now in May 6th, you're going to go through and present the short-term plan, the September plan, and address with these issues. So I'm hoping by May 6th, that board meeting, you can respond and provide answers to those questions. The other thing is also been for more than 2 years, you have on 65th Street in front of the U-Haul, a bus stop that is no longer operational. And people are going there because it's right across from the Target, thinking they can catch a bus. You need to check and determine and correct these situations. 65th Street, you have most of the time where the, should we say, Connect card stations are out of service. I hope that somewhere the general manager, somebody's going to provide an update of dealing with the electronic bulletin boards and the other series of factors of that the Connect cards have not worked in so many locations. Thank you. That's my public comment.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Any other folks wishing to speak?
There's no additional hands up.
With that, then we could move on to the next item, please, Tabitha.
The next item is item 8.1, the general manager's report.
Henry.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Chairman, members of the board, and the public. Thank you for joining us tonight. As we have been discussing with the board and the public for several months, there is a national workforce shortage, and it is a particularly severe among transportation operators. We have been working very hard to streamline our hiring practices and to make it easier to apply, including hosting several in-person hiring events. Our recent 2 in-person hiring events had excellent turnout. We had 162 attendees and 86 applied for positions, and currently 69 are in various phases of the hiring process. We're quite optimistic that the applicants will move forward, but understand that a few may drop off through the screening process. This is really a great step towards filling the vacant positions and eliminating our trip cancellations altogether. As a matter of fact, last week, our bus cancellation rate was limited under 1% most of the times. Last weekend, we implemented April service adjustments at about 97% of our full pre-pandemic service level, which better align with staff levels, allow our bus to operate on a consistent and reliable schedule. And to ensure the best service possible for our customers, we will be participating with a private firm, adaptive transportation network company called UServe to provide additional service support for SAC-RT Go paratransit service customers starting Tuesday, April 19th, after we worked with our union in a very successful win-win, negotiation. With this change, we believe our ADA customer service will be significantly improved. Of course, as we ramp up hiring and people start to return to the office, we are planning to restore service back to 100% by September of this year to make sure we make good on our mission to take people where they want to go and when they want to go. However, we need the community's help. SACAT is currently seeking public comment on service adjustments proposed for September this year. There are 19 bus routes with proposed changes in the current plan, and we're taking customer feedback through the end of the month on the proposed route adjustments. Our team has already held several public meetings on the change, and there are a couple of additional opportunities in the coming weeks. So please check our website at sacat.com to offer your feedback and public comments. Some other good news. At the end of last month, we received the first delivery of 30 new Gaelic low-floor buses. By the end of next month, all of the 30 new buses will have been delivered and deployed throughout our system. The low-floor bus is durable and reliable and will improve the customer riding experience. Then next topic, I would like to provide some quick update on SACAT's progress on some of SACAT's surplus properties and how we have been progressing transit-oriented development throughout our region. Later this month, we will close a sale of property in South Sacramento at Calvin and Auburn. The previous vacant lots will be transformed into a new commercial retail location for the community. Additionally, a couple of years ago, board approved the sale of 2 SACAT surplus properties that would be converted to much-needed housing projects. First, this year, adjacent to our 65th Street Library Station, a 223 unit, 750 beds infill development will open, as you can see from the PowerPoint presentation. The project includes almost 8,000 square feet of retail space and will help revitalize the community. Directly across the street, a second hotel by Hampton Inn is being constructed. Additionally, along Arden Way, CHW is nearing completion on a 120 units affordable apartment building adjacent to our Royal Oaks Library Station. The project will serve as a catalyst for neighborhood revitalization and smart growth, and provide affordable housing options for the local workforce, families, seniors, and veterans. We will be sure to invite the board and the public to the ribbon cutting ceremonies for these projects later this year. Also, along the current smart headquarters library station at 50 Lines Street and Rancho Cordova's Martha Library Station, there are 2 large TODs in the progress with thousands of housing and commercial units to be built. Needless to say, the Real Yards TOD, north of downtown, 224-acre, the largest urban multimodal development in the nation with tens of thousands residential and commercial development. Finally, in partnership with SHRA, SACAT will be constructing a new library station along the Blue Line serving Miraiso Village. The new department is nearing completion on a 420-unit apartment building in Sacramento's River District, and the SACAT received a $17 million grant in 2019 to help move forward with new track and the construction of the station And plus, we have worked on the Florida Night Rail Station 3 years ago, and try to start a TOD over there with close to 1,000 residential units and along with other amenities. Then onto the legislative front, last week the California Assembly Local Government Committee held a hearing on SACART's enabling cleanup legislation AB 2015. The legislation, which will improve SACART's business process and efficiencies, passed Committee 8-1 and was the only bill on consent. AB 2015 has now been referred to the Assembly Committee on Public Employees and Retirement, which is chaired by local Assembly member Jimmy Cooper. It is recommended for consent too. And on the federal front, last week, the FTA released the FY22 apportionments for formula funding. The Sacramento region is set to receive approximately $58.5 million in funding this fiscal year. And President Biden's FY23 capital budget includes $50 million for the streetcar library extension project too. By comparison, the region received just under $44 million in FY22, the formula fund. We received about 33% increase or more funding because we are $58.5 million in the formula fund. We are beginning to see an infusion in new federal funds thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law. And of course, there's additional discretionary grant funding available that we have been applying for, such as the RACE grant, LOLO, and the Capital Investment Grant Program, which will be 67% more than before this year versus last fiscal year. Then next month is the Metro Chamber's 50th annual Capital Cap trip, representing the opportunity for our region to advocate in front of the key law and policy makers, especially for transit. I know a handful of SACART board members will be attending. So Chris Florence and Deborah Sananis, 2 staff members, will attend this event. Both of them will try to collaborate with our board members on this trip to take care of any logistic issues and help on messaging to promote public transit in DC. So far, we knew 5 of our board members will on this trip, maybe more. Then lastly, to conclude my remarks, I would like to just highlight last week, SACART in partnership with CCAC and the city of Sacramento received a $500 million Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant from Caltrans. The Caltrans Strategic Partnerships Grant Program works to identify and address statewide, interregional, or regional transportation deficiencies through multimodal transportation planning. The funding will be used to further plan for American River Crossing Bridge that the future Green Line to the airport library extension would utilize. With significant federal funding available, as I just mentioned, this grant award will help position us to be more competitive for hundreds of millions of dollars more funding in the future. With that, this concludes my report. Thank you. Get back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Henry, for the good report. Any directors have any comments or questions? I see Director Harris has his hand up.
Thanks again, Chair. Henry, I really want to thank you. When I took office, one of the first things I wanted to work on was TOD at 65th and Folsom. And we had such a great opportunity site there. The RT bus queuing area that was highly underutilized. It was a difficult negotiation with your predecessor, and it really didn't get very far. But as soon as you were hired, the doors open, because I know that you highly value transit-oriented development. You know what it means to our transit agency. And frankly, working with you has been a pleasure. I have to say that I'm delighted that all those units will be open this year for students for Sac State University. And I believe that it will definitely enhance ridership on RT. Additionally, Marisol Village is a tremendous build out. And again, with the 12th Street Station, it will do nothing but enhance ridership and make our transit agency more fully functional. And again, in the rail yards, you know, all of these TOD developments are going to do nothing but make our transit agency more fully utilized and more efficient. So it really is a testament, I think, to your mindset about bolstering our agency and our ridership. So again, I just want to thank you, Henry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Harris. Good points. Don't see any of the hands up. Tabitha, do we have any members of the public wishing to comment on the director's report?
Jeffrey Tartagia has his hand up.
General manager's report.
Jeffrey Tartagia.
Okay, Jeff. Go ahead.
Is John Garamandi the representative for the chair of transportation back at the federal government? I just figured that's a question to be asked to see when we have local representation and we can continue talking with John in regards to transportation issues. Just a quick question regarding the cap to cap.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I like talking to all the members that could help us. We'll see who's local on that committee, Jeff. Thank you. And with that, let's move on to the next item, please.
The next item is number 9, reports, ideas, and questions from directors, if any.
I do not see any hands up. I saw Director Harris's hand go to his head, but I think you were bidding on something in the auction. Well, with that, with no comments, I'm going to hit the virtual gavel and adjourn this meeting.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Thank
Oh, you're
you. Good
welcome,
night.
Linda.
Good night. Thank you.